As usual, the bill features two of the swingin'est stars of the day. Dinah Washington, who started out as a vocalist of Lionel Hampton's band, and the former Chick Webb saxophone player, Louis Jordan.
And Dinah Washington is at the top of the list, but it wasn't easy back then to be black, female, and famous. Tragically, Washington didn't survive it.
When people mention Dinah Washington, they immediately think of the Queen of the Jukebox, an irreplaceable icon of 1950s American blues. She was the first black woman to win a Grammy during an era steeped in discrimination, with a voice that silenced America, reaching from dim corner bars to the most prestigious stages. But did you know that behind the spotlight lay a string of tragedies the world never truly heard? A life with 7 husbands, children left behind, sleepless nights drenched in sleeping pills, a fortune torn apart by legal battles, and a sudden death that bore signs of something far more sinister. She lived like royalty, owned 4 Cadillacs, over 100 couture gowns from France, and a vault filled with jewelry worth over $250,000. Yet she died buried in debt, with no will and no named heir. All of it was buried inside the mansion at 1336 Detroit Street, where Dinah spent her final years, and where a secret basement stayed locked for decades. So, what really happened in that house? And what else is still waiting to be uncovered? Watch this video to the end to uncover the whole truth behind a legendary woman's life. They say, if you want to understand someone, look at the last house they chose to live in. For the Queen of Blues, Dinah Washington, that house sat quietly at 1336 Detroit Street, a 3-story mansion in the heart of Detroit, reflecting the entirety of her fractured life. Glamorous, cold, and filled with secrets that were never meant to be decoded. On the rainy afternoon of April the 23rd, 1959, Dinah stepped out of a sleek black Cadillac, wearing an ivory fur coat, cat-eye sunglasses, and bold red lipstick. She wasn't accompanied by a manager or a husband, just her driver. Standing in front of the wrought iron gate, gazing at the red brick mansion draped in ivy, she whispered, "My mother rented all her life. This one will be mine, just mine." The mansion, built in 1927, spanned over 8,600 square feet, with 5 bedrooms, 3 living rooms, a wine cellar, and a basement sealed shut by a heavy steel door, one she would later have permanently locked. Dinah paid $62,000 in cash to own the house outright, just weeks after winning her Grammy for the iconic recording, "What a Difference a Day Makes." It was the height of her career, yet also her loneliest. She once told a reporter, "No one applauds when you're eating dinner alone." After moving in, Dinah lived with her 6th husband, a quiet saxophone player, and her 2 sons from previous marriages. The house once echoed with Saturday night music, filled with friends, artists, journalists, but no one was ever allowed on the 3rd floor. And the basement? Strictly off limits. A housekeeper once said that on some nights, Dinah would sit alone on the living room sofa, smoking in silence, and murmur, "If I disappear one day, this house will sing for me." A year later, on the night of October 19, 1962, after a fierce argument with her husband, Dinah fired the entire household staff, changed every lock, and specifically had the basement door welded shut from the outside. From that night on, the light in the basement remained on, though she claimed no one ever went down there. Then, in 1979, nearly 2 decades after her death, a retired banker named Clarence Rowe visited the mansion with the intent to buy it. But as he walked through the hallway, he stopped in front of an old piano. Music was playing, but no one was sitting there. After the newly broken lock was removed from the basement door, they went down and discovered a letter inside the piano drawer. It was addressed to Dinah from her eldest son. The envelope was still sealed. So what did it contain? A final wish? A confession? Or perhaps a clue to a death the public never fully understood? To this day, the contents of that letter have never been released. But from that moment on, no one ever dared purchase the house again, because what people feared wasn't the house itself, it was the truth still locked inside the place that witnessed the unraveling of a legend. And to understand what was written in that letter that was never opened, one must go back to where all the pain began, when Dinah Washington was still Ruth Lee Jones. A black girl born on August 29, 1924, in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, in a town where poverty and prejudice suffocated every breath. Her father left early. Her mother remarried a railroad worker, and the family moved to Chicago when Dinah was just 4. In that bustling, tempting city, she never had a childhood. By age 9, Dinah was singing in church like an angel with a deep bronze voice. But at school, she was bullied, mocked for sounding like a man, and for the sadness always lingering in her eyes. A little girl who sang about hope while quietly swallowing humiliation. At 14, Dinah dropped out of school, unable to endure the constant rejection. She took a job bussing tables at a bar, later moving to background vocals in nightclubs where black women were paid less than half if they dared raise their heads. And it was there that the first trauma struck. Her first manager, a middle-aged white man, often pressured her to stay behind after shows for private auditions. Dinah never told anyone, but the greatest shock of her teenage life came on a winter night in 1940, just after she turned 16. At the time, Dinah wasn't the queen of the blues. She was just a young black girl performing filler sets in the dingy clubs of Chicago's South Side, where saxophones clashed with the screams of women being harassed behind the curtains. People later recalled that Dinah had fallen for a married horn player, well known in the scene for both his talent and his habit of chasing young girls. He gave her handwritten songs, took her to private studios, and was the one who landed her first paying gig. But just a few months later, Dinah began feeling nauseous and dizzy. When news broke that she was pregnant, her manager didn't ask what she wanted. He simply called a car and took her to a nameless clinic tucked behind a Mexican barbershop near 51st Street. She wasn't allowed to ask the doctor's name. She was given an injection and left to curl in pain under a flickering yellow bulb and stained walls. When she came to, it wasn't a nurse she saw, it was her manager. He shoved a piece of paper into her hand, a performance schedule for the next month, and said coldly, "You want to be famous?" Then no babies. No man claps for a singer with a belly. After that, she never let anyone touch her without permission, not even makeup artists. She bought a small pistol, kept it hidden in her purse, and carried it with her for the next 3 decades. At every show, she made sure she stood where she could see everyone in the room. She didn't trust any man, not even those who played in her band. People often wonder why a woman who sang so passionately about love could have eyes that felt so cold. What they don't know is that a piece of Dinah's heart had been carved out at 16, along with the child that was never allowed to be born. And perhaps the unopened letter still hidden in that old mansion is the only thing left that knows the full weight of that pain. They called Dinah Washington the Queen of the Jukebox, a woman who could turn pain into musical language. But the brighter her spotlight grew, the more the shadows inside her expanded until they could no longer be hidden. Her career reached rare heights, yet it was a journey riddled with clashes, feuds, and doors slammed shut, often by her own hand. In 1943, at just 19, Dinah rose to fame after joining the Lionel Hampton Band. For 3 years, she toured with them across the country, not just as the lead vocalist, but as someone who dictated everything, from drum tempo to set order. Lionel Hampton, notoriously hard to please, once admitted, "She didn't need me to lead the band. Hell, she could lead it herself if she wanted." That control only intensified. When she went solo in 1946 and signed with Mercury Records, Dinah quickly became one of the label's top-selling artists. In just 10 years, she released over 40 singles, at least a dozen of them charting on Billboard's R&B Top 10. But success came hand in hand with volatility. She frequently fired managers, replaced band members, and canceled shows on a whim. Once, during a performance in St. Louis, she demanded the drummer be switched out mid-set, simply because he lagged half a beat. For those around her, Dinah's outbursts became familiar. A lighting technician recalled, "She could smile and thank you backstage, then send a termination letter that same night. You never knew where her head was." One of her former managers confessed Dinah kept an emotional rating chart for each band member, and if someone scored under 7 out of 10 for 3 shows in a row, they were gone. After purchasing her mansion at 1336 Detroit Street in 1955, her obsession with control grew more extreme. She installed security cameras, nearly unheard of at the time, and kept separate locks on every room, even for the staff. The music room on the third floor was off limits to all but her. According to house staff, the mood of the home changed with hers. One day, soft jazz, the next, sorrowful blues, and sometimes just silence that lingered for 48 hours straight. Her tensions extended to peers, too. She had long-standing friction with several fellow artists, most notably Aretha Franklin, whom the public dubbed her musical heir. Though they never publicly clashed, Dinah once hinted in a 1961 interview, "Some people sing well, others imitate well." Aretha's mother had once sung alongside Dinah. They were close until Aretha rose to fame. Then the calls stopped. The congratulations stopped. Dinah never mentioned her again. Some said it was jealousy. Others believed it was fear of being replaced. It was no secret in the industry, working with Dinah was nearly impossible. When Mercury once proposed a duet with Nat King Cole worth $20,000, an enormous sum at the time, she flatly refused. Her reason was simple: "I don't share my mic with anyone." Her career, no matter how luminous, was far from stable. In 1955, after canceling a string of shows due to laryngitis, Dinah was forced to repay over $11,000 because her contracts lacked insurance clauses. In 1957, she poured $4,500 of her own money into staging a concert at Belmont Theater in New York, hoping to prove she could own the stage without label support. But only 32 people showed up. 5 of them comped. That night, she returned to her Detroit mansion and locked herself in the basement for 7 straight hours. The piano down there, the only one she never let anyone touch, had been brought in from Chicago, set in the coldest corner of the house. After that humiliating performance, Dinah had the basement door welded shut and installed a coded lock. No one dared ask why. Her volatility spilled into daily life. One week, she'd go to church, fast, and journal religiously. The next, she'd throw 3-night champagne parties, splurge on silk gowns from Paris, then flush one down the toilet simply because she didn't like the color. Walking through the front door, no one knew whether they'd meet a brooding artist or a furious queen enraged by a misaligned tablecloth. The Detroit mansion ceased to be a home. It became a private theater where Dinah projected her pain, her mistrust, her fear of betrayal, and her desperate need to control everything slipping away. Neighbors recalled hearing piano notes at night, sometimes scattered, sometimes sobbing, as if the house itself was mourning on her behalf. And maybe because she couldn't control the hearts of those she loved, Dinah tried to control everything else. She couldn't keep a man, couldn't keep friends, couldn't even keep her faith in herself. But she could lock a house, lock a basement, lock away the letter from her son, the one letter that made the strongest woman in blues tremble so deeply she couldn't even touch it. If Dinah Washington's career was a grand, soaring melody, then her private life was a fractured blues line. And if you ever thought that a woman who sang so passionately about love must have had a fulfilling married life, you were mistaken. Because behind every song of longing was a shattered marriage. Behind every ballad of forgiveness was a night spent alone in a mansion where no one knocked on the door. Few people knew that Dinah had been married at least 7 times, and not one of them ended with wedding bells, but with sighs, screams, or the sound of a gun. Her first husband was a stage technician named John Young. They married when Dinah was only 18, still performing in small clubs around Chicago. That young love lasted exactly 3 months. He thought Dinah was too ambitious, too determined to control everything like a man. They separated quietly. John returned to his hometown to repair air conditioners while Dinah stepped onto her first major stage just weeks later. Her third husband, Eddie Chamblee, was a saxophonist who toured the South with her. Dinah loved him for his gentleness, his calm, the way he always stood behind her and never in the spotlight. But that became the very thing that drove them apart. Eddie wanted a quiet, obedient wife. Dinah wanted a partner who saw her as an equal. In 1953, after a show in Atlanta, They argued violently, Eddie furious that Dinah had asked him to replay a passage for the third time in front of a live audience. That night, according to a hotel staff member who would have thought that, amid all those painful and contentious divorces, Dinah had once married her own manager, a man named Charles Carey, sharp and seasoned in the music business. They tied the knot in haste after just 5 months of working together, but the marriage ended in bitterness when Dinah discovered that Carey had registered the copyrights of 15 of her songs under his own name and sold them to another label without informing her. To end the marriage, she had to pay over $20,000 in compensation, an enormous amount for that time, forcing her to sell off personal belongings from the mansion and postpone a tour she had long scheduled in advance. And then came 1963, when Dinah did something few believed she ever would. She married Dick Night Train Lane, the black NFL football legend known for his ferocity on the field and his warmth off it. Dinah once said, "He was the first man who made me want to be a real wife." They lived together in the Detroit mansion, had dinner 3 times a week in the marble-floored living room, and often sat listening to classical music beside the piano Dinah kept hidden in the basement. But happiness barely had time to bloom before tragedy struck. One night during a performance in Cleveland, Dick was in charge of the accompanying music. When he hit the wrong final chord, Dinah fired him, right there on stage in front of hundreds of audience members. That evening, she wrote a new piece of music and left it on Dick's desk, along with a note that read, "Don't let the wrong notes ruin our song." Dick Night Train Lane may have been the man she loved the most, and he was also the last person to see her alive. But even that love wasn't enough, because Dinah couldn't outrun the ghosts inside her. She suffered from chronic insomnia, receiving treatment at 2 medical facilities in Connecticut and Florida, and she always carried sedatives the way other women carried lipstick. In her final years, Dinah regularly took 2 kinds of barbiturates to stay sharp before shows. The initial dose was 30 milligrams, then gradually increased to 90, then 120, until the doctors refused to prescribe any more, so she turned to private clinics, prescriptions under false names, and at times even unlabeled bottles purchased through personal connections. She was also obsessed with her weight. Every time she stepped on the scale and saw it go over 135 pounds, Dinah would stop eating for a whole week, surviving only on lemon juice and diet pills. There were months when the housekeeper cooked just 3 meals in 30 days, thin porridge, boiled eggs, and lemon water mixed with baking soda. Her stomach began to ulcer, her hair thinned, and yet she still sang, still applied her makeup meticulously, still stepped onto the stage in form-fitting gowns as if her body were a battlefield no one else was allowed to see. But what wore Dinah down more than the pills was the money. Every divorce meant dividing assets. Every time she changed managers, she lost a contract. At one point, she was being sued simultaneously by 2 record labels, one sound production company, an ex-husband, and even a jewelry store in New York. By the end of 1963, Dinah owed over $180,000, a staggering sum compared to the unstable income she earned from performing. To repay her debts, she sold off 2 Cadillacs, mortgaged the rights to 4 of her hit songs, and emptied nearly all the jewelry in the basement safe. Some of the assets were never found. Some said she sent them to family. Others believed they were taken after her death. And then, on the morning of December 14, 1963, everything stopped. Dinah was found unconscious in bed by none other than Dick Lane. On the nightstand was an empty pill bottle. The window was open, the bedside lamp still glowing. But one detail no one could explain: a 7-centimeter bruise on the back of her neck, slightly swollen, as if she had been shoved into the headboard before taking the pills. The prescribed bottle was missing. The housekeeper claimed she hadn't seen it for 2 days, and her statement was never entered into the official report. After a brief investigation, the coroner ruled the cause of death as barbiturate overdose and accidental trauma. But there was no further inquiry, no follow-up interviews, no second autopsy. The case was closed, as if everyone was simply too tired to look any deeper. Dinah had 2 sons, one born in 1945, the other in 1950. Neither of them lived with her. Due to her relentless schedule, unstable emotions, and a string of divorces, she left them in the care of her mother in Chicago. The eldest son, as an adult, once said, "I realized my mom was famous." From the record covers, not the dinner table. She never hid the fact that she wasn't a typical mother. In an interview with Ebony, she once said bluntly, "I couldn't give my kids a stable home, but I could show them how their mother rose up." Still, deep inside, perhaps there were things she had never dared to confess. In 1963, just a few weeks before she died, her eldest son, stationed at Fort Benning, sent a handwritten letter to the address of the mansion. The letter was nearly 4 pages long, filled with emotions, longing, and one simple wish: to see his mother before the holiday break. But when police searched the house after Dinah's death, the letter was still there, unopened, stamp untouched, lying in the drawer of the basement piano, the very place where she used to sit and play through her sleepless nights. As for the younger son, few knew this. He didn't attend the funeral. No flowers, no phone call, no message. He showed up 6 weeks later in court, accompanied by a lawyer, demanding his share of the estate, including partial music royalties and legal ownership of the mansion. When a reporter asked him why, he simply said, "I'm only claiming what was once forgotten." 12 years after Dinah Washington's death, the mansion sat still like a scar in the heart of Detroit. Dust covered the roof tiles. Ivy curled over the porch. The windows had been nailed shut from the inside, as if no one ever wanted light to come through again. No one rented it. No one moved in. No one dared touch the basement, rumored to be the resting place of her final recordings as the Queen of the Jukebox and the silent sighs she never said out loud. Until one autumn day in 1975, when a man named Clarence Rowe, a retired bank clerk, decided to purchase the house through a property auction. He wasn't a fan of Dinah. He simply needed a big enough home to grow old in. But on the very first day he moved in, he felt something strange. The basement, sealed with a heavy iron lock, had no key. When Clarence had the door broken to fix the electrical wiring, they discovered a hidden drawer beneath an old upright piano, covered by a moldy red velvet cloth. Inside was a yellowed envelope, still sealed. The sender, D. Lane, Fort Benning, Georgia. The recipient, Dinah Washington, 1336 Detroit Street. The postmark read early December 1963, just 2 weeks before her death. Clarence didn't dare open it, but he turned it over to Dinah's eldest son, the one who had lost contact with her for over a decade. And it was in that letter that the truth began to unfold. In the letter, the son recounted the last phone call between them. Dinah had seemed tense, even panicked. She said someone in the house was stealing her documents, her medication, even her savings books. That she couldn't trust anyone, except herself. And most haunting of all, she said, "If something happens to me, don't believe it was an accident. There's something following me from the basement." Few people knew that in her final months, Dinah had filed a lawsuit against an ex-husband for illegally claiming rights to her recordings and had begun preparing a new will, transferring the bulk of her estate to her 2 sons, something she had never done before. But the new will was never officially signed before her death. And so the old will, drafted by her former manager in 1958, was reinstated. According to it, most of her assets and music rights fell into the hands of a third party, including the very person who had once tricked her into signing over her catalog. The 1964 court case had been dismissed for lack of legal grounds. But after the letter resurfaced, the media began to reinvestigate. They uncovered a long-lost audio tape temporarily stored at a studio in New York, capturing Dinah's final phone conversation with her former manager. In the recording, she screamed, "You won't get another damn dime. If I die, don't think anyone's going to believe you." The case was reopened. Too late. The manager had died in 1972. No one was charged. No one recovered what was lost. All that remained was the mansion and the letter that sat in silence for more than a decade, bearing witness to everything that was never publicly spoken. The music world mourned a legendary voice. Her family lost a mother who never got to say sorry. And the public, stunned, began to realize, sometimes what kills an artist isn't death. It's the silence of those around them. Though she died in loneliness, surrounded by unanswered questions and a fortune torn apart until the very end, Dinah Washington's voice remains, a wound that never healed in the history of American music. As of 2023, Dinah had a total of 48 singles that charted on Billboard R&B and 16 studio albums, including masterpieces like For Those in Love, The Swingin' Miss D, and What a Difference a Day Makes, the song that earned her the first and only Grammy of her lifetime. Her name was added to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 1993, 3 decades after her death. Major artists like Aretha Franklin, Amy Winehouse, Diana Krall, and even Beyoncé have cited Dinah as a powerful influence on how they channel emotion into their music. And yet, few know that the majority of Dinah Washington's music rights do not belong to her family, but to old record labels and former managers, the very names that controlled her contracts during her peak. Her children receive only a small fraction of the annual royalties, sometimes less than $2,000 per quarter, while her name continues to be printed on compilation albums, streaming platforms, and reissued vinyl records. And what about the Detroit mansion? After lying abandoned for 15 years, the house was sold again in 1989, then renovated into a small private museum, displaying a few personal items that remained: a pair of red Ferragamo heels, a 1958 portrait of Dinah, and a copy of the letter that was never opened during her lifetime. The basement remains locked. Though the space was reopened, the new owner left it untouched, as a form of respect. Some say it's where she recorded her final unreleased demo. Some say it's where she drafted her new will. Others believe the basement was simply where she went to escape the world, when everyone called her Dinah, but no one remembered Ruth Lee Jones, the little girl who once sang in a Chicago church, once got pregnant at 16, once used a kitchen knife to defend herself in her own home. Dinah Washington died at age 39, leaving behind a trail of regrets and questions still unanswered. We still listen to her songs on rainy days, in sleepless nights. But have we ever really listened to the pain behind that voice? If you were the child of someone like Dinah, could you forgive her for missing your birthday? If you're a lifelong fan, do you even know who's actually profiting from the songs you stream? And if one day you find yourself standing in that mansion, letter in hand, would you be brave enough to open it? Share your thoughts below. What do you believe really happened the night Dinah passed? Was it an accident or something the world chose to ignore? Leave a comment, share this story, and subscribe, because there are still so many untold legends, so many voices the world tried to forget.